What am I doing? I'm talking to an empty telephone.
I don't understand.
Because there was a dead man on the other end of this fucking line.
Three Flavours Cornetto trilogy. Now playing Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, The World's End. Mr. Staker, yeah. Mr. Peter Ian Staker. P.I. Staker, right. Piss Taker, come on. Welcome to Corona Cinema. I'm Leon Way, and I'm joined as always by Mason.
Hello, you alright?
Ross.
Good afternoon.
And May.
Good evening.
And we're starting with the first film in the Three Flavours Cornetto trilogy, which is Shaun of the Dead from 2004. A man's uneventful life is disrupted by the zombie apocalypse. Nice and concise there. Directed by Edgar Wright and written by him and Simon Pegg. Same for the whole trilogy. Also same for the whole trilogy, starring Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and then in this one you got Kate Ashfield, Bill Nye, a few other guys in there that I haven't read down. But yeah, whoever picked this, you can talk about it.
I don't think there's much point in me talking about it because that synopsis also had so much description in it. Anyway, I think horror comedies in general are some of the hardest films to make, like as a high quality. I think like Zombieland is the only there's loads of them, but Zombieland's the only other example that's like it's actually a good film. And I think this sits above even that in this genre or subgenre. And even in general, it's just probably one of the most creative like zombie horror films, or even like horror films out there. And especially when you think about the fact it's like 17 years old now, it's actually pretty mad. Kind of set the tone and like set the mold in this trilogy as well. And obviously, Hot Fuzz had a lot to beat, but we'll obviously talk about that. And yeah, just everything about like it's so smart. Even like right at the start, he's skipping through the channels. And it's making like a proper sentence. And you just kind of got what you usually get with Edgar Wright films. Just like I feel like when Edgar Wright makes a film, and with all the films this week, it's just him just showing off his directing. And we had it with Baby Driver, and if you watch Scott Pilgrim, it's the same kind of him just being like, yeah, by the way, I directed this, putting his stamp on it at every single shot and like scene. The camera work, the quick dialogue, it's Edgar Wright to a T. And I think he's just one of the masters at like visual comedy as well. And he's one of my favorite directors, if you can't tell. And yeah, I'll say literally from the first scene, you get kind of a sense of all the characters straight away as well. It introduces them all nicely and then go like, yeah. And I feel like I'm going to talk a lot about his like directing because I like the bit with where they're making the plans and it's got the quick shots and the montage, and then when he says we're going to wait for this all to blow over. And even some of the writing as well, when he's like, you want to their housemate, I can't remember his name, but he says you want to go live like you want to live like an animal and go live in the shed, and it's just kind of foreshadowing later events, and that kind of stuff is quite cool. I enjoy. Especially when you watch it for like a second, third time, it's cool spotting that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's got other tones to it as well. Like it's quite emotional when his mum dies, and even when his stepdad Bill Nye dies, it's quite emotional. And I think what Edgar Wright usually falls flat is the romance side, and I think this one's probably his strongest kind of romance story within the film. Yeah, and you go on a full journey with Shaun as well. It's a good character story of Shaun, Simon Pegg. He grows so much as a character gradually through it, like kind of starting off as like a bum, then obviously leading them throughout the whole film. And it works well in this because he's not like your typical hero type character. He's just kind of meant to be a British bum kind of thing, and yeah. And it really smartly takes the idea of people living like zombies and how day-to-day life people are just kind of zombies anyway, and puts it in parallel with the actual zombies in the film, like how at the start when people just kind of living day-to-day life, it's got people in the background just kind of walking around like zombies anyway, which is why when the zombie apocalypse does happen, Shaun has no idea and doesn't realize. Yeah, it's just that there's a lot of things to this film. There's obviously more to talk about, and yeah, I think it's great. One of the best of its like subgenre, and yeah, that's it really. And I also want to say that David's a dick.
Or he's a twat. Was he a dick? Or maybe both. I think this
Both.
film has the best use of twat, I think, in any film in history. This is like the first film I remember watching, like, conscious that I wasn't supposed to be watching it. Like, I watched it like the year it came out, or maybe the year after. So either 6 or 7. And it's like, yeah, it's the first one I can remember knowing, yeah, okay, this is naughty. I shouldn't be watching this. Why was my cousin? I think my cousin was like 10, 11, maybe. And he was showing it to me. I think my dad was there as well, to be fair. So my dad and my cousin were like, yeah, let's sit in front of the TV, let him watch Shaun of the Dead. And despite watching it then and seeing it many times since, like, hasn't lost any of the humor. I think literally nothing has been lost on any of the rewatches since I first saw it 17, 16 years ago. And I agree with Ross. Like, every character interaction, like even just in that first half hour, every single interaction between and the dynamics between all the people within the film is just set, and it's all just works perfectly. Whether it's with the roommate, whether it's with the stepdad, that like ominous thing when you think he might be a zombie at that point in some way, where he's lurking in the wherever that shop is. What do you call it? Electronics kind of shop. And yeah, with like the opening thing with the opening conversation he has with the friends, where you don't realize they're in the room as they're talking about it. It's like, yeah, I don't mind Pete and Di. I don't mind you guys. It just kind of pans away to the left. That's where Edgar Wright's skill, like Ross said, like his visual comedy comes into play. And I like as well, Ross said as well, like kind of subverting the protagonist and the way he is in this film in terms of not always being heroic. Like, he's kind of just a normal guy who's he's got a certain amount of skill, he's got a certain amount of knowledge, like with the thing with like the fuse box, he knows what to do in that situation. He's quite resourceful, but at the same time, he can be incredibly incompetent as well, because he's not an all-conquering, like Brad Pitt in World War Z kind of protagonist in a zombie film. He still have like the moments with like when they hand him, they throw him like, you know, the swing ball stick, and instead of using that to like jab it through the zombie, he actually tries to lob the like plush, the whatever it is, tennis ball thing at the zombie. So yeah, moments like that. A lot of the weapons used in this are really cool, particularly the scene where they're like sifting through the records to decide which one they're going to throw. They end up missing with pretty much all of them. But that's a really smart way to do a scene like that, because it gets that kind of, like, I don't know anything about any of those records, don't know anything about records or music of that era, but I can still appreciate the humor of them having to decide, okay, that shit. Batman soundtrack, nah, fuck that. This one, yeah, that's my second album, don't throw that. Yeah, all works very nicely. Mason, did it work for you?
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. I remember I watched this at a really young age and knew that I shouldn't be watching it. And that kind of made it funny. Like, I probably laughed at the scenes like that when they're throwing the records, but I had no idea of like the actual comedy intended. I'm just sat there probably laughing because other people are laughing. But yeah, watching it as an adult, I haven't seen it, I don't think, since I was a kid. And it's just so funny. I feel like it's just, I don't want to be all like, oh, British, blah, 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 but the comedy just feels very British, and the setting with all three of these films, really, like the setting just feels so typically here that it's just really like comedic. Like, there's just little things in this film that just make you crease just for no reason. Like when the two like bands of people like run past each other and they're just comparing like the exact same people basically. And there's just so many moments with this film where you kind of find yourself creasing, and it's like silly humor. It's not like smart humor. It's just like, it's not, I guess childish is the wrong word, but it's that kind of humor where it's the best like humor for these kind of films and the story that they're trying to like put across and stuff. And like Ross said, I think this one has that really good balance of showing emotion as well. It doesn't really feel that out of place. It feels kind of on brand for Simon Pegg's character to kind of be like that. And he has these like really quick, like emotional, like outbreaks like 2 or 3 times in the film, but they seem fine. They don't just seem like this ridiculous thing happening. So yeah, I think the film just does so well kind of blending all of it together into a film that's like it's the perfect time as well. It's only like an hour 40 long, and I think it's a sort of film.
I feel like that's like the most skillful part of Edgar Wright is how he does put those like emotional bits in there, and it never feels out of place. So they have those bits in all three of these films, and it never feels like awkward or clumsily handled. Like in this one, where it's when Bill Nye and Simon Pegg, when they have that moment in the car when he's dying, and he's like, "Yeah, I just wanted the best for you, even though we had a difficult relationship. I always wanted the best for you. I loved you like my son." Da da da, that kind of thing. And then it's able to go from that way. It's like genuinely affecting, but it switches like within seconds. It switches to hilarity with when he's like to his mum, "Oh yeah, he's dead." He's like, "No, he's not." And then he's just turned into a zombie in that moment. It doesn't feel. That doesn't undercut the emotional like impact of that scene somehow. I mean, that's where like Edgar Wright's like most gifted in that sense. And yeah, basically, I love that scene as well, where they walk past each other and like the two groups mirror each other, especially Matt Lucas on the end. It makes it funny because there's like familiar faces. Like you got Matt Lucas, Martin Freeman, and what's her name? It's Tamsin Gregg. She's in Friday Night Dinner and some other stuff. Yeah, like Matt Lucas at the end where they walk past each other and it's like, all right, that's the most like British thing. But that's like you export that as like the most British phrase. All right, barely even getting the words out. And I think Nick Frost for me kind of won the movie overall. I feel like a lot of his lines stole it for me. It was just perfect, like stuff like when they're practicing to be a zombie so they can walk through to get to the pub, and he's like, let's see yours. And he's like, I'll do it on the night. It's just like little subtle things like that. It's the way he just does it. So yeah, the way he does it, there's just not a lot of enthusiasm. It doesn't feel like he's trying, and that just works perfectly for me. May, do you think, where do you stand on who's a funnier character in this, Simon Pegg or Nick Frost?
I think Nick Frost was funnier, and Simon Pegg has to bring in that kind of realism and frustration with all the other characters. You know, when he has to fight off one of the zombies in the garden, and then all the others, like David and Nick, are just standing there, just watching. And he's like, feel free to step in at any time, because it's like he could die at this point, or any of them could die. And they're just watching because they're just not buckling up or like not taking it seriously throughout. And you can really like get the frustration. Not to say that his character isn't funny, but the others definitely allowed to like play into the realm of being a bit more less serious with their actions, because I think Simon Pegg is the one you're meant to be able to relate to throughout this entire experience. And there are literally so many perfect little moments with this film that all knit together and make a very solid film. I think when I first watched this film, it was always on TV. So I'd never watch it. I always missed the first half an hour, but not realize I was missing the first half an hour. So when I watched this from the start, I realized there is so much build up to like, I always came in when they found the zombie girl in the garden. That's when I thought the film was meant to start. So when I found this like extra half an hour, the film was so much better. And I really enjoyed how they kind of like build up to a zombie apocalypse without like actually doing it. Like someone would just be sprinting down the street and he'd be like, oh, okay, cool. And he carries on walking. And like someone would be like eating someone like in someone's garden and he just kind of walks past because he's hungover. Like just all these little bits that kind of like related to the day before, as Ross was saying. And they will just look similar because everyone acts so like zombie like all the time. I really enjoyed kind of like Philip's arc. Not really an arc because he was in it for maybe like 7 minutes. But what Bill Nye managed to do with that character and turning from like someone who's a dick to someone who's like, you can understand where he was coming from as someone who's picked up a child who's already basically fully grown and doesn't want to have a new father. You can start to empathize with him just before he's taken. So it does add that tenderness to the scene with it still being funny towards the end and still like panic. So there's like, he's just jumbling up a bunch of emotions. It doesn't really fit like one genre or theme. So it works well together. And I like the mum in it as well, because I think she's like the mummiest mum, pretty much. Like, I think everyone can see parts of their own mother in her. And then like how she didn't want to be bothered when she did get bitten. And it's quite a hard scene where he has to shoot his own mum in the head when she turns into a zombie. And like he actually does it. That's it's just like you don't expect to see that in a comedy film where someone literally has to almost execute their own mum. Yeah, and it's just tough as well. And then you can kind of see the strain on that, and then David still being a dick, like saying things like, "Well, it had to be done. I think we all made the right decision." It's just not the right time to say things like that. And it's just some people are just so annoying and tactless, and that this film kind of shows it really well. And kind of the whole theme of the film as well, with Nick Frost holding Simon Pegg back from everything he wants to do, and like from his relationship, from his career, from his like house, from everything. It's kind of like a nice, not only like metaphor for like his life, but also you can see it in like everyday actions with like Nick Frost just not stepping up when Simon Pegg needs help throughout the entire film when it's dealing with the zombies as well. And he does kind of step up at the end, but it's kind of like too late by then. I also enjoyed the scene in the pub with the Queen playing on like the jukebox, kind of the hints of action, like cinematic scene put to music that wouldn't usually be like a fight scene, and that kind of hints at the first things we could see that kind of develop into the Baby Driver film when he first started playing with things like that, and then it kind of led to that whole, possibly that kind of like in the trailer scene from Baby Driver, the whole chase scene put to music, and eventually the whole film. So it's nice to see he was experimenting with things and like how it would work. And I'm glad he did it in this film, because then it really did lead into something really nice. I also enjoy like the foreshadowing of the dialogue, like saying, "Oh, bet he wishes he'll be dead in the morning," things like that. And then it works really well, kind of like, and to feel like the whole film following this kind of like foreshadowed arc, kind of like they run through the plan that they're going to do at the start of the day, and it kind of happens as they say it would happen. So the dialogue works really well. And also with British comedy, you kind of just feel at home with it. There's not much of a strain to fall in step with the characters and fall in step with like the humor that they have, because I don't know, British comedy it does hit different to American comedy for some reason. Like it's just so much easier. Like you don't even have to be paying attention. You don't have to get the setup of the joke, because the setup's almost in the culture of just being British. All right, yeah, all right. Like it just fits. And the normalness of the characters as well, I like. It's not like some Netflix Riverdale, everyone looks like a fucking high school football player who's like all looks the same, we all look perfect, they're all like 35-year-olds playing to like 17-year-olds. Like these are just real people. They're not the best looking people, they're not like the fittest people, they're all just a bunch of people put together. Some of them are dicks, some of them aren't. And it's just, yeah, they're just real people, which I like a lot. And they act how people would act. So it just feels much more lifelike, because everyone's not from a catalogue model magazine. And yeah, I think with the humor, you can't really put your finger on why something's funny. It just is funny. Like someone will just do something in a funny way and you laugh and you go, "Why is that funny?" Well, I don't know, it's just funny, And I don't think the comedy needs to be explained. Otherwise, then if I have to explain it, it's kind of lost, if that makes any sense. And yeah, I think this, as Ross was saying, this is the zombie comedy film. Like nothing comes close to this. As again, maybe Zombieland, but I don't think anything. This is the template, and I don't think anything will get close to it again. So yeah, the film really has no equal.
It made Tarantino's top 20 films since 1992. He does that list because that's when he made Reservoir Dogs. He does his top films since then. It made his list. I feel like if they remade it, there he'd be like, I feel like he'd be 35 rather than 29. I feel like it does feel a bit weird to be reflecting on your life in that way. Like, oh, I'm over the hill at 29. I feel like it would be like slightly older now. And I feel like the perception of what you need to like do in your life, like the speed you have to do things at, is like a bit more. It's not as urgent, I don't think. Like 20 like when he said he's 29, I was like, what the hell? Like, it's not that deep. Like, yeah, you're maybe a bit maybe you could be a bit more adventurous in your life, but it's not like anything like disgraceful. It's not like he's not like the biggest loser you're gonna see in a film. But yeah, top film to get us started in the free. See, I'm meaning not to do that. I have to probably get my tongue to do the TH sound. Three Flavours Cornetto trilogy. Okay, let's get some ratings. Ross.
I think I'll go with an 8.4.
May,
I'll go with an 8.3.
Mason.
I'll go with a 7.7.
Okay. All right, should we just send it there then? We're on Spotify, Google, Apple. I'll give it an 8.4. Okay. Hot Fuzz from 2007. A skilled London police officer is transferred to a small town with a dark secret. Well, people just love like these short, very brief synopsises for these films. Don't know what's going on there. Maybe it's the same user on IMDb. Starring outside of the obvious, like I said, starring got Jim Broadbent in there, Olivia Colman, Timothy Dalton, Paddy Considine, Rafe Spall, a few other familiar British faces. Whoever picked this, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I haven't seen this film again. I don't think for years. I think any of these I haven't seen for ages. But I think Hot Fuzz is probably my favorite out of the three. Just the general setting immediately, like this guy from London having to move to the countryside. I feel like I could resonate with it a bit, like moving to Welling. That's what I felt like. It felt so like countrified, and the whole dynamic of him just like being so confused by absolutely nothing happening in this little quiet town. It's really funny, and I think this one kind of has the best story for me. It's just, it works really well. The way that you can tell something's just not quite right with these people. But I watched it last out of the three this week. For some reason, I thought there was something completely different that went on with these people. I didn't think it was like a group of people or a killer. I kind of just assumed in my head it would be like Shaun of the Dead or The World's End, where it's kind of like some kind of apocalyptic thing. But I think, yeah, this one, the humor kind of just gets me a lot more in this one. Like all of the accents and all the comments. Like we spoke about it being quite British already, but this one kind of homes in on that even more for me. Like every interaction feels very natural, but it's every kind of sentence that anyone from that police station does is just like piss takery, basically. There's no seriousness at all whenever they talk. It's always just like a little like dirty joke, or just they were just kind of mugging each other off, and it's just it works really well for me. And to be fair, there's some bits that actually made me jump as well. Like the guy in the cloak, so like I guess there's a group of people in the cloak and stuff. There's a few shots where it turns really quickly, and I like shit myself a little bit. But it has just a really good blend in this one, and I feel like it was the most enjoyable watch for me, really. And I really like as well. I think the most important thing that I like the most about this film is that halfway through, when he binge watches all of like those cop films and stuff, you can see a very clear like tonal change with the way that the film's kind of been shot and stuff like that. And I guess because he's now like educated on those films, the way he acts is just completely the same as those films. It's just so funny. Like when he walks back into town on the horse and stuff, everything from that bit onwards and the way he responds to anything is just like he's watched the film. Yeah, it's just so funny to watch. It's a good film.
Yeah, it's interesting, that shift. Like, kind of pivots from being like more of like a mystery kind of film for the first like hour 20, and then it just becomes like an explosive action mess for the last 40 minutes, and that works for me. And it kind of functions both like a parody, but also clearly an homage to those kind of films, like bombastic action films, or the ones it's referencing. And I've seen since I watched Hot Fuzz for the first time last year, and since then I've seen Point Break, so that there's even more satisfying, like the little references to that Nick Frost shooting into the sky at the end. So yeah, that added something for me. But Matt, do you think that was an interesting way for this film to go, to be like a more calm mystery film for most of it, and then just go all out action for the climax?
I definitely did enjoy the mystery portion of the film, especially how it made Simon Pegg kind of contemplate whether he is being paranoid, and how I don't know who it was, like the main policeman at the station, like Nick Frost's dad, saying that like you've seen it loads of times where big city police officers come to the countryside and then get overwhelmed by not being understanding anything's going on. So you kind of think, yeah, he is kind of crazy, until the Yarp dude, like the Hound, come to his house and then tries to kill him. Then then that whole like, okay, this is real. There is someone out to get him kind of thing. I suppose you kind of see with the murders, but like it looks like he's pretty much defeated. up until that point. And then the shift to becoming a cliche, just kind of like action film doesn't feel cliche, like it's good, like it's funny, like your stuff you want to see. And like the cheesy lines, like at the gas station. And yeah, like him strutting on a horse into town and getting like the school kids to help out with the spray paint. It all just like ties together really nicely. It's like everything you want to see from the film. And it kind of like, what I like about this film over the other two is the other two have finales, but they kind of feel like the best part of the film's already done, if that makes any sense. But this film kind of builds up to an even bigger finale, and you enjoy every part of it, and it feels like it's really going somewhere, and the resolution is proper. For some reason with Shaun of the Dead, I feel like the resolution isn't that great because like everyone's dead. There's only like 2 characters left, and his best mate's a zombie in the shed, and they're just living out their like peaceful life. This one's kind of like, I don't know, it's just like the be all end all of shootouts, where also no one can actually shoot for shit for some reason. No one can hit anything with anyone, and the only time they actually kill anyone is like if they shoot a hanging basket and that falls off and knocks an old lady out, you know. But it doesn't take away from the film at all because it's just brilliant. And it's kind of got that like emotional ties as well of everyone's kind of dealing with their own, not trauma, but like situations, and they're manifesting it in the situations they're in now. Like Simon Pegg not being able to switch off from work and then having that kind of grapple with himself. Is this another case of him not switching off from work, or is he actually onto something? And then also like Danny and his father just not being able to like get over the fact that they lost their mum in like a roadside traffic collision or whatever. So all of these things tied together really nicely. And I like how quotable this film is. It's probably the most quotable film ever made, I reckon, because I think almost every other line is something that you can just quote. Probably my favorite being, "It's just bolognese, Andy," because it just works for some reason. I don't understand why. And like the annoyingness of like the two inspectors or detectives or whatever they are, the Andys, you know, how they just don't believe him at any point, and just a back and forward of just like annoying sarcasm just works really, really well, because I think everyone's gonna like that. Anyone would get annoyed in that argument, and Simon Pegg's like frustration with the whole situation is just seen clearly throughout the film, and it's displayed perfectly. And it's just funny how like of a serious character he is, especially that little montage at the start where it says like he's like got like the fastest 100-meter dash, he's got the highest crime detection rate, the highest like arrest rate, he's even stabbed through the hand by someone dressed as like Father Christmas or something, and he's also like a, I don't know, just like champion sports day or something. He just does everything like to the best of his abilities. And it's, "Hi Nicholas, how's the hand?" You know, and he gets asked that like 3 times. There's just so many nice little moments, and even like Bill Bailey being in it twice, and then you're not realizing there's 2 different Bill Baileys. Nobody tells me no. It all just works perfectly. Yeah, and I wouldn't really change anything about the film. It's definitely the strongest of the 3, and it's just literally a solid classic, and it's a part of like cinema that doesn't really, well, it explores over most films the kind of like the country aspect of the UK. Like there are like these little villages everywhere where everyone's like, I don't know, like overly particular about just the small things in life. Like, you know, the council, can you get permission from the council to have an extension? Can you like put these flowers in? You know, does this look nice? Does that look nice? And it's just funny to take that to an extreme. And I think everyone's definitely met or been somewhere that kind of resembles this place. So yeah, definitely this is my favorite of the three films. Excuse me.
I like how you said collision instead of accident, as they say in the film. I didn't know that. I learned that from this film. But then I feel like even like on radio, they'll still say like there's been an accident on the M5, so they need to watch Hot Fuzz. But yeah, I do like how it's like a complete character shift for Pegg, and he kind of does. You see that throughout the 3 films. It kind of shows his like range, I guess, as an actor. Like he goes from being more of a slacker to like this diligent, stern police officer. And I like how they illustrate that. Like with like the callback to Shaun of the Dead, and they do this again in what's it, like the fence jumping. So initially he couldn't do it in the first film. Now he's just like skilled, just hopping over like it's nothing, like a proper athlete. And I also think the kind of storyline of like the dark heart lurking beneath this like provincial town will always be intriguing. It's one of those things. Like this was like inspired a bit by The Wicker Man. And whether it is The Wicker Man, where it's less comedic, or it is something like this, the whole like what's going on in this place vibe is always kind of draws you in, and you're kind of you want to explore what's actually going on here, and having this like little secret like cabal of town members gathering to keep their image as the best village in the UK, wherever it is, would do it, but whilst doing these obscene crimes, but still having the thing that just works so well is still having that kind of like affable like country the accent, and just the way they behave is just it's just so like the contrast between that and the stuff they're doing is just perfect. And like like the violence and everything like that compared to how just like placid the English countryside is and the West Country accent is. I think that's the most like appealing thing. Like I said, like that's not really been explored in any other film really that I can think of. Maybe I've watched like loads of like old like British cinema, maybe there's something like this, but I doubt there's anything that executed it in this way. Mason, do you think that was I mean, Ross, I haven't spoken to you, have I? Ross, did you think that was a good thing?
Yeah, I've literally got that written down in my notes. Like it's like one of the only films that addresses how weird these like small British villages actually are. Like pretty much anyone you go in feels like a cult. It feels culty, and it feels like you're in like the Wicker Man village. You're the policeman walking around like you're probably about to get murdered or something. And yeah, it's the way it's done is like it's so well as well. I think you kind of touched on it earlier about how it's the first like hour 20 or whatever. It's like a murder mystery, and you're kind of with Simon Pegg, like not having a clue what's going on and trying to figure it out and being like, what the hell? And then like the last 45 minutes, like 3/4 an hour, whatever. I don't know why I said 45 or 3/4 an hour. It's the same thing. Is literally like non-stop action, and you just want to watch him like take down these guys. And yeah, it's the pace of the film never stops, whether it is through the murder mystery part or through the action part. And I think that's how it does so well. And that's where the comedy is as well, like having a high-paced action thriller in like a weird quiet village. It shouldn't work, but it does. And I think that's really like a homage to how good it actually is. And yeah, the probably the funniest. I don't know whether this and Shaun of the Dead are definitely the funniest ones, but yeah, just like at the start where it's just like little things. I just found it funny, like when he's going in to talk to his ex-wife, and he just starts talking to someone that's in the same suit, and then has to turn around and talk to her. It's just funny in that kind of like subtle ways like that. And yeah, I like it.
And when he goes to see his boss, when they tell him that he's going to be transferred, and it's like the little bit where it's like, oh, you want me to go higher up? You want me to get the detective? You want me to get the detective down here? There's everything like that, and the fact that it's Steve Coogan and Martin Freeman again. They've just put so many like famous faces within all three films, even when they're not playing like a major role. They just pop up and provide like a bit of humor for one or two scenes. So really works well. But I think Timothy Dalton was like really striking the first time I watched it, and still watching it again this time. Like just how kind of smug and like commanding he is in every scene. Like, and there's like a bit of menace to his performance. But I don't know what it is. I haven't seen him in anything else. Obviously, he was James Bond for like a couple films a long time ago. And yeah, I haven't seen him in anything else. So this is very impressive to see him stride into this film and really, really put on a strong performance. Mason, did you think he was a compelling? He's probably, I guess, he's the main villain. I guess like he's the most prominent member of that like evil society within the village. Do you think he was a compelling character?
Yeah, I think it's because we're like, as the audience, we're encouraged that it's just him. Like, as Simon Pegg believes it's him, like we're led to believe that at the same time. So he kind of gets the most screen time out of that group of people. Like I said, I think his performance was just really good because he plays that like that obvious looking villain. Like even his car is just funny. Like the way he drives his car and just pulls up to every scene and just like looks at like the murder scene. He's like, bad accident, huh? And then like drives off and stuff like that. It's just it in a way it could be cringe. It could be on borderline cringe, but it's just not, because the way that all these actors deliver all these scenes, it just works so well. And yeah, like I said, I think his performance is really good in this, and I don't think it was too standout. I don't think it was where like he stole the show or anything like that. I think he just was equally balanced in the whole cast, really. But I think for some reasons, well, it's kind of cheap humor, but there's just something always so funny about like evil old people in these kind of films. Like when you're seeing like some granny like with a gun and stuff, it's just jokes. Like that whole scene at the end when Simon Pegg's on the horse walking through the town, and then they all just like, she's on a little like bike with the little basket at the front, and she's there just like shooting at him and stuff. It's just, the film just really does deliver, I think, in just like any kind of humor. But I do kind of question how like other countries, like how do Americans find these films? Do they find it as funny as us, or they kind of just sitting here watching it, what the fuck is going on? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm interested to know. Obviously, like American critics reviewed it, and the reviews are all strong for all three of the films. But I'd be interested to know, like broadly, what like the American public think when they go to their local cinema and see this West Country action comedy mystery thing go down. Yeah, I'm really curious, because obviously Simon Pegg's quite not a massive star, but like he's in Mission Impossible. He's in what's the other franchise? What's the other franchise? He's in Star Trek. He wrote the last Star Trek as well, and he's obviously in Star Trek. So yeah, he's quite a big star. So, and this is his main 3 films. So yeah, I want to know what the Americans think of this. Also, with think about the old people, like the couple that own the pub, and when it's like, yeah, when they talk about the newspaper reporter, where he's like, and all his like little mistakes and his misprints, he's like, yeah, he said I was 55, I'm actually 53, that kind of thing. Every time she says that twice in the film, she says it again when they reveal them as the little at the round table with all their hoods on. They do that line again. It's still funny as the first time. Also, Olivia Colman, obviously Oscar winner, just in this film, being hilarious. Probably like every line that comes out of her mouth is funny. I'm pretty sure. Like I feel like it doesn't say an awful lot, but every single line is just like quotable and hilarious. So yeah, shout out to her and her little like cackle that she does every time. That's another thing. Every time the characters all laugh together, especially at the end when they're after Simon Pegg's kind of like integrated within the team, and they have another little funny joke, and they all just go ha. Just, everything just works well about the humor of this film. So yeah. Let's rate it. Mason. Matty's got a point. Let's go to Matty.
The last thing I'll probably say about the film, even though it's like set up as like a mystery and they're trying to find like an extravagant link between this death and that death, and she was sleeping with him, but she knew this and this, and it looks like it's going to be really, really complicated. And I like how the end reveal is it's more simple than that. It just goes, well, he was an average news reporter. He made loads of typos, so we killed him. That was it. They didn't like someone's flower arrangements. They didn't like they didn't want someone to like give their florist skills to another county. Like it was just simply a lot more simple than it seemed. And I like that kind of, you didn't get to the end, you're like, what? I don't really get that. I think it was a much nicer and even like a more, not scary, but horrible explanation for why they killed all these people. They just didn't like gypsies, and they just didn't like the mime that walks around the town centre. So I like that about the film, that it didn't try and overcomplicate the ending.
I love a model village as well. Don't know why. I used to love at Legoland. They had like the vast, like so many different places across the country. Like they had London in there and everything like that. All just able to explore with like trains going around and all that stuff. Like model village. I want to go to a model village at some point. The pandemic's over. I want to explore the model villages in the UK. Okay, let's get some ratings now then. Mason.
I gave it an 8.4.
Matty.
I gave it an 8.8.
Ross.
I'll go with an 8.7.
I'll go with an 8.5. Okay, the final film, The World's End from 2013. 5 friends who reunite in an attempt to top their epic pub crawl from 20 years earlier, unwittingly become humanity's only hope for survival. Bit more expansive synopsis there. This one's got Martin Freeman in a more prominent role, this time starring role. Paddy Considine again, coming back. Eddie Marzan introduced to the pack, so is Rosamund Pike and Pierce Brosnan. And this would be Matty's film, so you can go ahead and speak about it.
So this is a fitting film for us, considering we're all from Welwyn Garden City, and this is where this film is filmed. And I think that might add a little bit of relatedness, not just to the places, even though you can recognize small parts of it, I reckon. But it also adds, like, I think we can all easily see ourselves in, I don't know, 10, 15 years where we've all moved from Welwyn, and then we all go back and go to like the Pear Tree or the Attermore or the Grove, you know, and then we'll be like, we'll kind of look at around and go, we don't really recognize the place, but we kind of do. And I feel like there's that kind of relatedness for the film already, which is quite cool. Before you even like get into like the plot or the characters. But I think I'll talk about the good bits first, actually. I definitely enjoy Simon Pegg's role in this film as someone who can't let go of the past, and that one night is all he had, and he just wants to recreate it, and his whole kind of like, not existence, but just like everything, all his motives are built around that, which is kind of like it's kind of like a sad way to live, and it's kind of led to all his problems and like him being put into care, basically. And he displays that really, really well. And I think one of the saddest parts of the film is when he kind of breaks down with Nick Frost at the end of the film, and he pulls back his wrists and he sees that both of his wrists are tagged, and he says you need to get help. And he said, I got help, and help was a bunch of people sitting around in a circle talking about how shit things had got. And then when he starts to cry, he says, they told me when to go to bed. And I feel like that's probably the hardest hitting line in the entire film, like how someone who felt like he held himself in such high regard, and he was held in high regard when he was younger, his life just didn't take off. He just didn't get any better than that. And it's just kind of like, it's just sad, and it hits really deeply. But then also he kind of shows his acting range as someone who is kind of like a drain on everyone else. He's kind of like a bit of a scumbag, only cares about himself, but he is funny. Like, he's a funny character, and he's funny to be around. And he does kind of bring out the worst, but kind of the fun behaviors in everyone in the group. Even Nick Frost, who doesn't want to like him, he does get him laughing and reminiscing about different things. And then when they do get drunk together, their rapport, again, as in all the films, works really, really well, where they're both arguing with the giant Bill Nye robot, which I really like. And I think this film does have some of the best quotes, or maybe just the best comebacks in the whole film, when he's arguing with the great intelligence, whatever it's called, and he says, fuck off, you big lamp, you know, or maybe, why don't you get back in your spaceship and fuck off back to Legoland, you cunt. I think that is probably my favorite. I don't know if we can say cunt on the podcast. Anyway, I think that's probably one of my favorite comebacks in the whole film. But I do feel like Edgar Wright here has tried to kind of repeat the idea of something larger going on in a small town as he's done with Hot Fuzz, just not as well. And I think kind of like this film is really good, but I feel like it's just less well received. And I think also a part of it is the ending is less optimistic. Like with the other two, there is an optimistic, happy ending, but with this one, it's kind of like the world's in a far more unrecognizable state, because there's a new equilibrium, which is kind of like a post-apocalyptic world where everyone's like living alongside these blank creatures, and there's like no electricity anymore. And I don't know, it's just a bit more unrecognizable and a lot less relatable. And I think the whole point of all of his films is the comedy is relatable. Some weird and wacky stuff, like a zombie apocalypse happens, but then there's a new normal of society that we can see afterwards. And also the same with I forget what the little town is called in Hot Fuzz. But with this film, I think that's just not there. So it just feels a bit too fantastical, even though the British comedy is there. But I don't think that detracts from the film for me. but I can see why it would detract for other people. Yeah, I genuinely enjoyed the film, but I did feel it was weaker than the other two.
I can never remember like how the alien situation like resolves itself. Like I've seen this quite a few times, and I always, every time I come back to watch it again, I always forget like how that ending kind of goes down and what happens in it. And I feel like kind of like sums up my feelings about the film. Like it's just not quite as like indelible as the previous two. And like just like the staging of it, like him just bellowing into the sky at Bill Nye's alien overlord thing. Like I don't know, this doesn't work for me. Like Matty said as well, like the Hot Fuzz was the best ending out of the three. And I feel like, yeah, this one and Shaun of the Dead just kind of like labor their way to a finish, whereas Hot Fuzz is like, yeah, electric all the way through. Like it's still like interesting like ideas in the end at the end of this film, and it's still like fun. Like mate, like some of the quotes in that like end bit are still funny, but yeah, it's just not quite as memorable because I literally haven't. I probably watched this, I don't know, 6-7 times, and every time I come back to watch it, I always forget like everything that happens towards the end of that film. Mason, did you find that was a kind of an issue with the film? Like the ending just wasn't as, I don't know, not entertaining, just not as coherent as something like Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, it's actually one of my notes. I think the ending it doesn't really seem as fulfilling. Like, I mean, it kind of should because you get literally an ending to every character, but I didn't like that. It didn't follow the same formula as the other two films, doing this thing where it's like so and so's here doing this, so and so's here doing that, and it didn't seem like the right kind of comedy or the right kind of approach to take with these kind of films. And it was my first time watching it, and like you said, this film just seems kind of forgettable. It is strong where it has the same comedy, and I feel like it's tried to use the same recipe as the other two, but it's kind of just missed the mark a little bit. And that's the kind of issue with this film, is like it's almost there, but then it's tried to go a bit further in other ways or try and be a bit more creative, and it's got lost. I feel like you can see it's got a much higher budget. I could be wrong, but it seems much more higher budget. And in my head, this one seems almost a bit more accessible to like people in America and stuff. But it just doesn't seem very. I don't really like the villain. It's just I can't really connect with the film. But on the surface, I can enjoy the comedy and I can enjoy stuff. But like you said, when it comes to the ending and generally, it's just a shame because it just seems a bit forgettable. I couldn't really tell you much about the film, and I only watched it 2 days ago.
It is another different character for Peg to get into, kind of a variation of Shaun of the Dead, but like, this guy's more like, he's a bit of a loser, but he's more kind of energetic, enthusiastic, and like still never grown out of his like childish habits. And then contrasting that, you got Nick Frost, who becomes for the first time this more like officious, uptight adult, teetotal, all of that. And while he's good in the film, it's just kind of not what I want from him. I think that's again like another thing to add to the list of things where it's like, yeah, it's not, nothing's bad. It's still like a good film, like better than a lot of stuff you watch, but like it's just this, a few of the beats just didn't quite hit the way you want it to go. But fundamentally though, like it's just so cool to just see Welland in this like fairly big British film. Like it's just entertaining, like watching them go to familiar like landmarks, for want of a better word. Got like the post office on the corner there, RIP, and like it's funny just watching them like stroll through town, and like you're able, because we know the area, we know like the journey they're doing doesn't really make any sense because they're walking towards the Howard Center, then they end up, despite walking that direction, they end up on the other side on like the road, the like posh roads at the back of town behind the fountain, which doesn't make any sense. And then they circle back to get to the Tonic, and then they go to the Cork. Like it's just funny watching a film, which is quite a big film with like Simon Pegg, who at this point has already been in, like in 2013, he'd already been in Mission Impossible. Did Star Trek come out 2013? I think it might have came out in 2013. So he's like a big star, and he's just here walking around our little garden city. And especially my favorite bit is them walking into the Cork. That was the most like evocative. That was just like clear. The doors are right there, walking right through up to the bar that we've all done at some point. Like it's just funny seeing that in a fairly big film. I also want to know where like Newton Haven is on the map in this world. Like did it replace where obviously it was shot in Welling, then I think parts in Letchworth, then I think somewhere else it was shot. Can't remember where. But when is Newton Haven like, did it replace Welling on the map, or was it Letchworth? how far is it from High Wycombe Station where they go? High Wycombe Station, another place I've been to quite a lot. So it was also nice to see them chilling out there. But yeah, I want to know how long is the drive from High Wycombe Station to Newton Haven? Is it the same as Newton Haven to Welling? But Ross, do you like me? Do you just, aside from everything about the film and the content within the film, do you just enjoy seeing the tonic and seeing that corner where Domino's is, or they took Domino's out because you can't brand it, or you can see Halifax and Preza in this film. They didn't take those down. But yeah, do you enjoy the Welling Garden City aspect of this film?
It's so funny. I think I actually just spend the first because the first 4 pubs are in Welling pubs, and I think I just spend the first 4 that half-hour section just being like, oh right, it's tonic, oh right, it's like. And as you said, the walk just doesn't make sense, and him the drinks that are just outside the cork, and he just drinks them because he's barred. It's like I've probably done that before. It's just so funny, just seeing that, and you say I think I just spend that section of the film just looking out for it, and even a lot. I think most of the other ones are in Letchworth, and I think it's the one before the World's End. It's Letchworth. I was like, that looks exactly like Letchworth train station. And it was because they used it outside the train station. Then the inside was a set in Elstree or something like that. It's just so funny just seeing bits around like that. And I've never had that. I think this is the only film where you can have that experience. I feel like I'm watching one of my student films that I've made, just people walking around Welling Town Centre, that I made when I was 16. It's just funny. But yeah, I think the problem with this film, though, I think the other 2 films being so good and so well received and etc., it had a lot to live up to. It's not bad by any means. I don't think it's bad at all. It's just, I think you watch the other 2 first, your expectations are so high, and then it does kind of fall flat. I think it's still funny, but in terms of everything else, story and the villains and whatnot, it does fall flat in that section, which I think is a shame, because I don't think it's as bad as it may appear at first when you think about it afterwards. But yeah, it's so funny just looking around Welling, because as you said, it just doesn't make any sense the way they're walking and stuff. It's just that them walking down Parkway, you see the fountain at the start and stuff, you're like, and yeah. Literally, the first pub, the Pear Tree, it's literally I'll just go walk there now, take a 5-minute walk. Yeah, sick.
I want to know who they got as extras. Did they hire people from Oaklands? They must surely, if they're filming in Welling. I feel you would always do that to kind of help out the local community by hiring young film students around the area. I remember it being filmed, but obviously I wasn't that into film at that point. I think Ross has a note about this.
So my tutor, he tried to get people, because this is 2013 or something. This is years before, but he told us about it. Because he tried to get people in for the film from the class or whatever, and they rejected him.
Sad.
Yeah, and because he tried to do it, he tried to get us as extras or showrunners and stuff. That series they filmed last year or something, that was in the Shredded Wheat Factory. I can't remember what it was. It was a horror series that they were in. He tried to get us in for that as well, and they either didn't reply or rejected him again or something. It's quite sad, but at least he tried. Respect.
Could have been us. Those teenagers that appear when they cross paths and walking through next to where Debenhams was. Could have been us. Just yeah, we saying, May.
I'd love to see a remastered version where it's us 4 walking past them 5.
Yeah, Ross can edit that. We'll release it and see what Edgar Wright says. Yeah, May, I feel you appreciate this. I do some of the way the fight scenes in this are shot. It's kind of fluid. I thought in Hot Fuzz at times it was like chopping a bit too much, which can be a bit annoying for me when I watch action films. I thought the way it flowed through the scene, and when it was multiple characters, the way it shifted nicely between their different perspectives. You could always understand what's happening. Yeah, I thought those scenes were quite effective. Was that something that you liked?
I think especially the first bathroom fight scene, the first fight scene. It wasn't the first bathroom fight scene. You know what I mean? The first fight scene that happened to be in a bathroom. where that's got 5 people versus 5. That's a 10-man fight scene in a small space. That must be an absolute nightmare to film, because you got to think about what 10 people are doing at all times, and then some of them have got no limbs, no heads, blue blood everywhere, and you got to think about continuity. So I think that was done really, really well, and kind of how like the camera moved with the fighting. And I think Nick Frost is my favorite person to watch in a fight scene, because he just conducts it with just so much power, and like he's a big dude, and like it literally just conducts power when he just punches, and he just runs through people, especially like towards the end, after he just punches through. No, he headbutts Pierce Brosnan's head off, and then he picks up 2 stools and then just kind of like crosses them across, and like as if he's like drawing 2 swords pretty much, and then takes out like half the pub. So kind of that fluidity from the whole film works really, really well. I think it's probably the best out of all of them. Something I forgot to say for what's it called? Not Hot Fuzz, from Shaun of the Dead. I was going to say, if it was a real zombie apocalypse, and I had to pick any film to be in a zombie apocalypse from, I'd choose Shaun of the Dead, because the zombies seem like such pussies. Like, it's probably just the easiest one to survive at. Like, if you had like a baseball bat and you had any like level of athleticism, you could literally kill so many of them because they can't run, I think. So that in that way, the film was a bit frustrating, but it kind of like allowed the characters like to perpetuate themselves through the story long enough for just too many zombies to accumulate, I think, to become a problem. Can I say one more thing about World's End? Yeah, cool. What I would say about World's End is, the opening monologue where he kind of explains like the first night that they tried to do the 12 pubs, and they kind of talk you through how it went. That's actually like a mirror image of how the whole film goes, because they talk about how they started off and everything was going fine, and then he kind of bumps into Sam, and then she tagged on for a bit, but then they had to let her go, and they let her go in the car, and then pint 6, O-Man was gone pretty much, and even though O-Man was still there, it was just the blank version. So O-Man was gone by pint 6. And then they had to ditch Pete as well because he like chucked or whatever, and they had to bench him. So they did lose Pete at that point. And then from then on, it was like a shambles, and like it's basically said at every point that something would happen. It happened, not necessarily in the exact same way, but it happened to that extent, if that makes any sense. And then the sit back on the hill watching the orange glow of like the sun rising, but it was actually the orange glow of Newton Haven just being blown up. So that was kind of like nice how the first night and the second night, even though they were like however many years apart, they kind of rhymed, which is quite cool. Like in every way, like they even met like the Reverend Green when they said they were going to meet him. Yeah, I enjoyed that about the film. And I feel like the writing, there was a huge amount of thought that was taken into the writing and a huge amount of skill, and it's just a shame it kind of just missed the mark slightly on being as good as Hot Fuzz.
You said the zombies were quite easy to kill. I thought even if these ones are like faster, more flaky, they're still not like, it's not like an insurmountable task to take out one of these things. Just the fact that they're faster and they can like swarm you a bit more than the zombies. But yeah, even in this one, like they all won their fights whenever it was just 1v1, so you could take him out fairly easily. But like, yeah, get another fence hopping scene in here. And watching the 3 films back to back, I picked like there's so many like references and like callbacks across the 3 and within each film. I didn't know all of them down, but there was just so many times where like there'd be something at the start of the film that would then come back later on. There would always be like a payoff, a little payoffs every now and then within individual films and across the 3. Like the one that I actually did know was like the out of order sign that he picks up from, was it the first part? It's the first part where he tries to follow Rosamund Pike into the toilet. He's like, yeah, the disable's out of order, and then picks up that sign, and then later on they go to the other pub when they have the bathroom fight scene, and he whacks that on the door as he's leaving. So there's lots of like little things like that. I didn't know enough of them down, but I do like how there's that shows like an attention to detail, I think. And now we're coming to the end of this episode. I feel like with Simon Pegg, I feel like there's like a bit of unfulfilled potential with him, because like he's got these three films, then he's got like his like supporting roles in the franchises, which is like, yeah, fair, like he's made his money and he's good in those films, especially Mission Impossible. I like him, Benji. But outside of that, like he's basically everything he's done has been either like basically everything he's done has been mediocre or just straight up like trash, and nothing that's too memorable outside of these three films and then the franchises stuff. Whereas I feel like he could have had like something, I don't know, like a spy friend, something like the movie Spy with Melissa McCarthy. He could have had like his version of that, like that more like action comedy stuff going on with him. Like, I feel like he could have led his own franchise. I think it's a bit of a interesting one with him. I feel like there's more. He's had a good career, but I feel like he could have done more with the talents that he's got. Also, you got a point?
Yeah, I was gonna say about that. I think like Shaun of the Dead came out when he was like mid-30s, and like that was kind of his first big role ish. Yeah, it was, I think, and like because he's like a funny-looking British ginger dude, and doesn't look like, you know, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise. That might be why, kind of prejudice against funny-looking ginger dudes or something. But I was gonna say as well, like we were talking about like the detail in The World's End and stuff. It's like I didn't even realize this at first, but like the pubs are like the pubs are called it's like foreshadowing at each pub. So the first one's called The First Post, second one's The Old Familiar, but then like, you know, there's one called the Two-Headed Dog, and that's like reference to the twins. And then like later on there's the Hole in the Wall, in which he smashes a car through the wall, and The World's End is called The World's End because the last one, The World Ends, like etc. It's so much attention to detail, and I think that's a theme throughout all the films, and probably maybe increases throughout each film. And yeah, I think Edgar Wright is a great guy, and I want to meet him.
I bumped into her in the next pub, and then we went into the disabled toilets, and I bumped into her again. Had to get that quote in. Elite stuff. I think that's my favorite one from this film. Okay, let's get some ratings for The World's End. Matty.
I would give it a 7.7.
Mason.
I gave it a 7.5.
Ross.
I'll go with a 7.8.
I'll also go with 7.8. And you know what we're going to do now? Instead of doing the ratings, we're going to go to Actor of the Week, then do the ratings afterwards, because that gives Ross time to get his ratings ready. I had a thought last night. I was like, yeah, we could just do that. Then it makes much more sense. So, Actor of the Week. Probably could go with the obvious one, but I think when we do these films where it's like three actors, usually we come up with something more eclectic on the side. So, Mason, who's your Actor of the Week?
Gone for the obvious and put Simon Pegg. I haven't really seen him in many other films, and I guess his range over the three is quite impressive. Like you said, it's three completely different characters, and his performance is more than believable in all three.
Matty.
I wanted to give it to Nick Frost, but I felt like the range, or at least the range he was allowed to show, wasn't as wide as Simon Pegg's. And also Simon Pegg, when he displays these three different characters, they're not three different characters, they're like three different versions of the same person. It's kind of like if the same person had a different childhood and went into different careers. One was a fuck up, one was a police officer, and the other one was just a layabout who didn't take any opportunities. And he plays them all really well, and you can kind of see the similarities between them, but also the differences are subtle enough to not be unbelievable. And I think that's quite hard to do. As much as like presence Nick Frost gives, I think the subtlety that Simon Pegg has to work with is much more impressive.
Ross.
Yeah, Simon Pegg. I think Matty put it pretty well. Like, there's not really much else I can say. I think the range he gets to show is great, and he does it so well. And there's nothing unconvincing about any of these roles at all. I mean, same with Nick Frost, but as I say, Simon Pegg just kind of got to show more range within the films.
I'll go with something different then. I'll go with Timothy Dalton. I really like that performance. It's a smarmy, slightly ominous figure within the town of Sanford. is the name of the town in Hot Fuzz. Yeah, Sanford. Okay. Before we move on, has anyone got a favorite cornetto? This is the Three Flavours Cornetto trilogy. May, have you got a favorite cornetto?
I like strawberry, but I don't know which one that is.
I feel like strawberry's like the default, isn't it? I feel like that's like original, I guess.
So wait, do each of the films have a different flavor?
I think so, yeah. I think the first one's strawberry, and then the second one's like the chocolate. Is it like a chocolate one, just straight? I don't know.
I think World's End's mint. I'm not sure.
Because in the World's End, there's no actual.
it,
They don't eat. Oh, you found it. But I feel like in World's End, they don't actually eat a cornetto. It's just like the paper flashes across.
Yeah. Shaun the Dead's strawberry. Hot Fuzz is Classico, which I think is just like
That's the nuts one.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's got the nuts on top. I see it. And the World's End is mint, which I'll say is my favorite. Mint.
Yeah, mint's my favorite too.
I actually think I like Classico. I don't really like the nuts, but for some reason the nuts on the cornetto just kind of worked for me.
I'll go strawberry.
Strawberry is that. Strawberry is the normal answer.
Yeah.
It makes up for going alternative makes up for picking Simon Pegg as the obvious actor of the week. So yeah, trying to spread it out. I thought for instead of some of the other stuff we've been doing at the end of the podcast, I thought we could do like every episode like a recommend from each person, a co-recommend, Corona recommend. Where you any TV show, any film, maybe even a YouTube video you've seen, I don't know, since the last episode of the podcast that you feel, oh yeah, that's something interesting that we might not talk about on the podcast. So have this like last like 5 minutes or whatever to share anything that you might have. So Matt, you look like you're pondering something. You look like you've seen something fascinating the last 2 weeks. So yeah, what have you seen?
So yeah, I've watched a couple of films over the last week. Some I wish I hadn't. Some I'm glad I did. And something I feel like we won't dip into is probably the DC universe. I mean, maybe the work with Christopher Nolan and the Dark Knight trilogy, but not some of the later stuff. And I recently watched Wonder Woman 1984, and it's probably the worst film I've ever seen in my life. And I can't believe they actually fund films like that anymore. But I then did watch the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. And I think if you watch Justice League, leave the original one from 2017, leave it a bit, and then watch Zack Snyder's, you will not be disappointed. Because I think the way they changed that film and remastered the scenes, changed the writing, added in characters, changed the importance of characters and the dialogue and the tonal shifts that they used and the rebalancing of the fight scenes. And I think it really changes the way you look at films, the way that just not small. I suppose they did add an hour and a half of footage, so it's not small changes, but the way you balance a film can really change your perception of it and how everything works together, and kind of the message of the film being pre-hinted to, how you set up a premise in the start of the film, so it's not surprising when you get to the end when it affects the whole film, if that makes any sense. So I would recommend not all of DC, but the Justice League. If you watch Man of Steel, then Batman vs Superman, maybe the first Wonder Woman, and then Zack Snyder's Justice League, I feel like there's enough there that it's worth your time to watch. So that's what I would recommend.
I feel like I'll watch those again at some point and get around to Justice League, but yeah, don't know when I put that 4-hour film into the calendar. Ross, have you got anything you've seen in the last couple of weeks?
So apart from these films, we watched the Cornetto films and Oscar films. There's literally only one other film I've watched. That was Room, the Brie Larson film. Like, it's the second time I've watched it, and I thought it better. I really liked it this time, better than the first time. I think it was really weird. I wasn't expecting to like it more because obviously you know what's going to happen. But I think there's certain films where, if you watch it the first time, you get the shock value, whatever. The second time, you notice things and you can pick up on more. And I think that's what happened with this. And it kind of just shone a light on how good Brie Larson actually is in that film. Me watching this time as well, because I could kind of let myself concentrate on more of the film and different bits because I knew what was going to happen. Yeah, and like it's so good. Like, and Brie Larson's performance is so good that I'm not even surprised she won Best Actress for that. Like, I don't even know. it's kind of like it was like kind of like a surreal experience watching it, and then I was I it's based on Joseph Fritzl and what he did. I was reading up about all that. It's like kind of mad. I'd never like I'd like heard the name, but I had no idea who he actually was. And he had a woman trapped in his daughter trapped in his basement for 24 years, and his wife had no idea that was the case. And he had like 6 or 7 kids with her, and then managed to get 3 of the kids into his own house with his wife to look after, and his wife still had no idea that that was his daughter's kids. And yeah, it was just like it was so mad and like yeah, it was really interesting. It kind of them films that can lead you on that kind of I can't even think of the name. Like getting away from it and reading up about it, that they're usually good. So yeah, I mean, we might. It's not like something we won't watch, and then we probably might watch it at some point. But yeah,
I'm very familiar with Fritzl. I remember it happening at the time. I don't even know what year that was. I feel like that was another case where I was quite young.
2008 it came out.
2008, yeah. I have an acute awareness of everything that was going on with that. I don't know why. Because I was just watching the news at the time. I was like 9, 10. But yeah, I remember clearly that story coming out and all the details. Then there was all the jokes on Mock the Week and that and all the panel shows, stuff like that. Yeah. I watched Room a few years ago. I thought it was all right. I don't know if I'll watch it again. Maybe if you do it on the podcast, but yeah. Mason?
I watched the TV series Derry Girls the other day on Netflix. So it's pretty sick, to be fair. It's like a bit political. It's about Ireland, I think Northern Ireland, about like during the Troubles. It's got a really good balance of just like whilst you're creasing for like a 30-minute episode, they'll end the episode and kind of remind you of like the issues that are happening within that country at the time. And yeah, Shaun, it was a good laugh to watch. I think it's like 2 seasons, maybe 2 or 3 seasons. But other than that, on iPlayer, Roman Kemp released a documentary about men's mental health. It's really good. They'd be my 2 recommendations.
I could recommend Broadcast News, which I watched this week on Disney Plus, which is like probably maybe one of the best films of the 80s. But now I'm going to recommend a film that's one of the worst films of the 80s, but at the same time being bad. It's one of those, we talked about this a few weeks ago, like the good, bad films. Also on Disney Plus, Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise. He's basically disowned the film like 4 years after it came out or something. But it's just such a fun watch. Like, and just all the bad elements, like we talked about, like the bad elements of this film just make it so strong. Like the strength of the film is like he's a bartender basically. So he's got these ambitions to be this big like guy on Wall Street kind of thing. But he starts out getting a job as a bartender, and he's kind of trying to make money in that area. And it's just wild, like the skills and stuff they're doing. They're not very good at bartending because they'll be doing all these tricks and they don't even hand the drink to someone after they do the tricks. They kind of just do it, like they're just doing it for the sake of it. And then he ends up going to Jamaica to try and make more money. I don't know why that was like a thing. Was that a thing in the 80s? Like, yeah, I can make more money bartending in Jamaica than I could in New York. I don't know. But yeah, really a real vibe of a film with an interesting performance from Tom Cruise's right-hand man. I can't remember his name now. His name's Cogman in the film. He's an Australian guy. He's, yeah, a very, just the perfect good, bad film. Like, only an hour and a half in and out. Yeah, recommend. Okay, and rounding off the show is Ross's delayed ratings roundup.
Okay, so unsurprisingly, 3rd place, The World's End with a 7.7. 2nd, Shaun of the Dead with an 8.2, and 1st, Hot Fuzz with an 8.6. In terms of the overall rankings, that puts The World's End at 81st, between Dolomite Is My Name and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, another very British film. Shaun of the Dead, 39th, on par with Groundhog Day, and Hot Fuzz makes it to 11th, on par with 7, and just above The Terminator. So stick that up your Rotten Tomatoes.
Stick that on your iPod and shuffle it. Okay. Mad. Hot Fuzz is right up in there. Okay. At Corona Cinema on Instagram, on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, Stitcher, Podbean. The next episode will be the Coronies to celebrate the year of this podcast, which I think is on the 7th of April. I think that's the anniversary. But yeah, the episode will come out on the 14th, I think, something like that. Yeah, 2 weeks after this episode. But yeah, the Coronis. So stay locked in to find out the best film, best actor, worst film, worst actor, all of that good stuff. Until then, go well.
Cheers.
Cheers. I'm muted. I was trying to talk to you. I'm muted.
So,
Cool. That was a good episode.
Yeah, I like that.
That was a good episode.
Yeah, I'll message Edgar Wright.
Okay, cool. That'd be a sick one. Like, yeah. We'd have to do it.
How mad would that be?